You hear me now? No, I didn't quite catch it, Lou.
Uh-oh.
Still not getting it. Okay, I got it. Shit, I lost it.
Welcome to another episode of Hitting the Wall. So tonight I wanted to talk about the experience of a lot of Jodo Shinshu, people who kind of look into Pure Land Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, and encounter the teachings and initially filled with great hope. And because we look at our own lives and we think, yeah, there's not a lot I'm going to be able to do in terms of my own enlightenment. My own enlightenment project has been an utter failure. And the times we live in don't, just the times we live in just don't allow for anyone to kind of practice properly, and just don't have the understanding. Anyway, so we originally see that filled with hope, but then when we start to explore the teachings, we kind of hit kind of those barriers, those walls, as it were, have those questions that we can't seem to surmount or get a good answer for, and we leave. We get frustrated. There's that whole focus on one of the, and especially in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, there's that whole kind of focus on, understandably and importantly, Shinjin. But it kind of feels like if Shinjin hasn't arisen and it hasn't settled, you kind of feel like you're not in the Shinjin club, as it were. And a lot of times people talking from that club are talking to other people in that club rather than people who aren't in that club and have these questions. So you get to this point of frustration and you leave, and I come back and I leave, and I've left and I come back. And so that's what I wanted to kind of talk about tonight, is the leaving and coming back. And I don't know if you wanted to kind of, discuss that in perspective in your own life. I can go into it a bit in my own life first, if you wish, or if you want to talk about your
Either
perspective
way,
on that.
I think a lot of people try. I think spirituality is a very sort of like personal thing, and you try and look for something that makes sense to you, if you see what I mean. And Jodo Shinshu, how can I put this? It really does sort of like it can make sense to a lot of people, and then they go into it, and then there's this, like you were saying, like this barrier. Shinjin, okay, you try and find out as much as you possibly can about it and whatnot. And most importantly, how do you get it? Because it doesn't seem to be. I mean, it doesn't seem to be like a method, if you see what I mean. The collected works of Shinman and Vetus Menyo don't really outline the method as such. It's more a matter of listening very intently and deeply to Shinman's message and Menyo's message, and seeing how, and that at some point the penny's supposed to drop, and for some people it takes a long time for the penny to drop, and other people it seems to be very, very quick. And then, as in my own case, you think the penny has dropped a number of times, only to find out that it most definitely has not dropped, and it's that seems to be that seems to be the way it tends to go in Jodo Shinshu. It tends to go, and I think it goes that way for a lot of different paths in many respects. But the whole teaching of Jodo Shinshu is based on having this deep knowing, this deep belief that Amida Buddha has done everything necessary for your birth in the Pure Land and your return. It's somehow getting to that point, and I don't know about you, but there was a number of times where well, I thought I had got to that
Yeah,
point and then found out
yeah, yeah,
by
exactly.
experience
Yeah,
and to my own massive
yeah,
disappointment, nope, not quite. And so it's very difficult, I think, to measure, you know,
yeah,
because you
yeah,
because there are times you think you've got this sudden surge of faith, and yes, I've really got it this time, and then uh,
yep,
and
indeed.
once you've been through that about how many different hundreds of times you've been through it, it gets very frustrating, and so you think, right, that's it, I'm off, you know.
Yep,
But
exactly.
yeah, that's so yes, I can. I've definitely had that. That's for sure. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, similar experiences. I'd say I could kind of identify sort of two general periods when it was happening, and it happened several times in each of those. Probably, I would say um, a few to a handful of times in each of those broad time periods, but probably also as many mini ones. Mini periods where I left. Mini mini exoduses from the teaching, all for similar reasons. So, my first experience with it was, well, I was when I was with um, the True Shin Buddhism Sangha, online Sangha through the email group, and Paul Roberts famously led that group and was my teacher during that. I considered my teacher during that time period when I was with them for, you know, again, off and on several years. Sorry, I have a bit of a nasty, I've got a bit of the nasty British lurgy.
Well, there's plenty of that going
Good old,
around. That's
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, exactly. So, um, um, but unlike the lurgy, you can't catch going in and out. I think a lot of people think, I wanted to bring this up. A lot of times people think, I think there's people who kind of believe they're in settled Shinjin. And when they hear the questions of someone who isn't, who has really strong, well-founded questions, perhaps, and or experiential issues,
Yeah.
um, or very strong doubts that they express very well, I think there's this unconscious where people that kind of believe that Shinjin has settled in their life and they're ticking along in their Shin Buddhist path, and they suddenly hear these questions, and it starts to, there's this almost unconscious, ooh, I want to avoid talking to that person or engaging with that conversation or engaging with that Dharma dialogue because they're afraid they're going to lose. It's on some level. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the only ways in that would be happening is if they themselves were not, weren't experienced. But anyway, that's a phenomenon I experienced with all this. But so the two kind of periods. So while I was with Shushin Buddhism, and that was when I was very early on. I had been exploring it for maybe a couple years on my own, and then found the Pure Land paths, the sort of Pure Land teachings, as well as Jodo Shinshu, and on my own a bit. And that was, that had its own difficulties, because you run into the self or shared, the self power kind of uh, or partial self power approach of the traditional Pure Land kind of paths, and then you're like confused because you're like, well, uh, I thought Amita did this because for people who had no capacity, who had no merit, and and then you run into the more, the at the time anyway, it seemed like what was more prevalent was the more academic kind of Jodo Shinshu stuff, and that was a lot of that seemed like a bit of it watered it down, or you got distracted, or it's like, what does this have to do with Jodo Shinshu type
Mm.
of, when you get into it. So anyway, and I happened upon the, through uh actually interesting means, but I won't get into that, but just got into the tradition Buddhism, um Sangha, started asking some questions, and a lot my questions at the time um probably were coming from a place of I had become um over the years off and on quite secularized and cynical about religion in general
Mm.
up to that point, even though I was very desperate at the same time spiritually speaking. And that's what really brought me to, you know, to kind of be brought along to pursue, you know, Pure Land Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu you know, with some level of seriousness. Um, and so a lot of my questions had to do with that. It's like, well, I need to see how this is not wishful thinking here. I need to
Yeah.
see how this is not just convenient thinking that, for people who didn't want to actually get on with it in the self-powered paths. I need to see. And so, and I was asking questions from that place and from a very, secularized, cynical place. Um, but I was trying to be respectful and trying to word it in ways that, at the same time being very frustrated, you know, and so it was quite hard to not, you know, that emotion not to come in. So I was varyingly successful with asking it in a more, kind of calmer, reasoned way. So sometimes I would ask the questions that way, both of Paul and of the email group, and also sometimes where I would I'd just be very frustrated and angry and ask it in a very, just emotive kind of way. And that was kind of where the questions were coming from during my period with True Shin Buddhism. Even though I was getting, you got very good, the basic foundational teachings very clearly through Paul Roberts and his writings and things and his responses and things in the email group. So I was getting a good idea of the teachings, but I did have still had very strong questions and so many. That was the other thing too. I had so many, it seemed like there was never going to be an end to them during that period. So those were times where I probably, there was two or three kind of major times where I just left for a long period of time and just explored other things or other types of Buddhism or or just abandoned it completely. So in frustration, um, and plus other things going on in my life. That's the other thing. We're in this samsaric world and we're experiencing all that our past karmic causes and conditions have to offer. And that's there as well, those frustrations of just being a bamboo and just you know um so that's kind of where the two or three times I was in and out. I just reached the point where that wasn't getting I, the questions I was asking was being answered with other. It was as though I was asking other questions. You see, that's what it seemed like to me. I was asking very reasoned, very thought out, thorough questions, and I was getting what I felt were unsatisfactory answers, both from the at times, not the whole time, but at these times where I decided, okay, I've had enough. I'm leaving.
Sure.
Um, and I felt like my questions weren't really being addressed. That was either both, and I think sometimes that was true, and sometimes it was just kind of my own perception. Maybe they were being answered, but in a way I couldn't kind of grasp at the time or get my head around at the time. Some combination there, I think, so that was that. And then the period when I was and there was one occasion I remember during, um, before Paul Roberts, passed away, where I was working with him, and I thought that Shinjin had arisen and settled. That was one time in there that I had sort of convinced myself, that I was in this sort of 2 week period where I felt this kind of false euphoria, kind of about that, and then realized I just kind of, realized it wasn't what was happening, you know. And then so that was that period. And then there was the period where, I was floating when after Paul died, I kind of drifted pretty much completely away from the True Shin Buddhist group just because I think the focus had changed after Paul Roberts had gone from kind of a teaching questions, answers kind of thing to more of a praise and people just expressing through their own creative ways, their own thanks and gratitude, and which is there's a place for that. I'm not, but it just wasn't what I needed, at the time. And so I drifted away from that, and then eventually got in touch with, the MIDI G and started a brief dialogue, was given some, kind of instructions of things to read and think about, and and then it took me about a year and a half to do that, and then I went all in for a couple of years with Amelia G, and it was during that period um, where I was experiencing kind of convincing myself, do you know what I mean, that it had happened, you know, and somehow knowing within myself it hadn't. And so it was kind of, and it was kind of me. And so I had, I was raising questions and things and participating in some, level of Dharma dialogue, both individually with a teacher and with the Sangha itself when they would have the shared meetings, but not really anything of any depth because I had convinced myself, okay, I'm there, but I wasn't anywhere near. Do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so there were probably, again, I mentioned those many times within myself, I think I kind of was like, oh, well, I'm not really, but oh no, that's just my monkey mind. So I ignored it. Do you see what I mean? I had all these questions, all these doubts, all these barriers, all these issues with things. But I was like, oh no, that's just my monkey mind up to its old tricks. So I'm just gonna ignore it and just go on. And then finally, you know, after about a couple of years of that, I just, had realized the game I was playing on myself, not, and I wasn't being consciously dishonest with the Sangha or with the teacher at the time. It was because I had convinced myself that this is where I was in this place of, Shinjin and whatnot. And so I didn't really kind of realize myself that, when I wasn't really at a place where I was ready to really do the Dharma dialogue and the deep reflection in the way I wasn't enabled yet by then. I wasn't things, to do it as I am now, as I would later on. So there was that. And then, so I just, in a big way, I left, making these videos and not really telling anybody beforehand, just making these videos and declaring through these videos my reasons why at the time. And, I really wish I had handled that completely differently. But I didn't. So, and I made kind of my apologies and amends for that later on with those involved, but with that Sangha. Um, and then, so that brings me to the past, few years. So that was a kind of a third period where I I've hit the wall and I've made videos, I think three or four videos very specifically about my experiences with that in the past and in the present. Um, and so for a period up until probably through last year, there were times where I was getting to that wall and not feeling like I couldn't, there were questions I had and I couldn't get past, and would kind of for periods of hours or days or weeks feel like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm not doing this, anymore. The same kind of thing, but it was shorter and shorter periods
Mm.
of time where now when it occurs, it's it's kind of an hour or a day at most. Um, and I feel like I'm definitely past that place I was at, or I've been brought past that place where I was at when I was making those first few, hitting the wall videos. Quite a lot has shifted and changed and been cleared, um, and become kind of apparent or made. I've sort of been enabled to see things in a different way, or you know what I mean, empowered to really kind of see it. I feel by through Amita's light, through Amita's power, through Amita's working, and so anyway, that's been my kind of experience with it. And I thought, yeah, I just thought it would be a good idea to talk about it since you've experienced that as well.
Oh
And
yeah.
do you mind if I say currently are
Oh,
experiencing that
absolutely. Yeah.
in a
I'm
sense?
basically,
Yeah.
I hit a huge wall about 2 months ago. I think it started um, with an intensely personal issue,
Yeah.
um, and it's it's basically it's what I would call a defining moment of truth. Because you've got the reality of a particular situation right there in front of you, and it's so explosive and so in depth that it really just reached down into the core of where you really stand on on a whole bunch of things, not just particularly spiritually, and well, especially spiritually. And I think with people like who have how can I put this, a strong spiritual yearning. Life is not satisfied by just living in the material world, and career, hobby maybe, whatever else. But there are people that are have a strong spiritual yearning, and so they're out looking for something, and maybe they'll. And the thing is, the only way of finding out whether or not something is, how do I put this, something that's actually going to really fulfill that fill that get that hole, that spiritual yearning hole in you, is by diving into it. So
Exactly. Yeah.
years and years ago, I spent some years as a Christian, and then went from that to the more pagan shamanic style type things and whatnot, and came and from had a brief interaction with Hinduism and went into Buddhism.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just so impressed because it wasn't with Buddhism, there didn't seem to be anything there which would require me to have what I would describe as blind faith. If you see what I'm getting at, it
Exactly.
was
Yeah.
more kind of like, the Buddha himself was teaching on a very experiential level. He wasn't teaching anything that he hadn't himself experienced. He'd been through this. If you see what I'm getting at, he actually experienced the search for the ending of suffering and whatnot.
Yeah.
What was it all about? So when he came to actually teach it after, his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he wasn't just coming out with a whole bunch of stuff from books or scriptures. It was, this is my experience, and I don't want you to just believe me. This is how you can find out for yourself. You know, and so to me, that was kind of like a far more, a best way of doing it. So when faith comes on, it's not faith based on something you've read in the book. It's based on your actual experience of
Experience. Yeah.
something tangible that you've
Yeah.
experienced, in yourself.
Yeah.
And I think
A
that's,
very deep
yeah,
heart, mind, body, unified
yeah,
conviction.
yeah, that's
This
right. Yeah,
is
yeah,
true. This
yeah.
is, yeah.
Yes, yes. And you know, um, but for me, Buddhism itself was, like, wow. And I came across Pure Land Buddhism first of all in a kind of like a mixture of Jodo Shinshu and the Chinese variation of
Yeah.
tradition. And that's basically where where kind of, Theravada tradition as well to begin with. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path and whatnot. And just that first one, the first noble truth, life is suffering. Was yep, absolutely right. um, So, so for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been, being a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist and sort of like seeking this, the Shinjin thing. And about 2 years ago, so dissatisfied with my lack of progress on even this, because I mean, the reason why you go for something like Jodo Shinshu is that it's the easy path, right? It's advertised as being the easy path, and and I don't know whether or not that's proper advertising in
I'm
many
picturing this
respects.
wagon, rolling in with, easy path on it.
Yeah, yeah,
Come on down.
that's
Say
right. Yeah,
what
yeah.
you want. Sorry.
But and then you quickly discover that just this one thing, you know, you have to have Shinjin to benefit from it. You have to have that tangible
Mm-hmm.
experience of
Hmm.
that gets you to the core. And this, like you were talking about, just continued to elude me. And at some point, a couple of years ago, I got so frustrated with this, I thought, right, I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to go back to, you
Yes.
know, the three Pure Land
Back to the
Sutras.
beginning.
Yeah, back to the beginning. I'm going to go back to the three Pure Land Sutras, read them for myself without any filter on them, the best I can manage. And I was somewhat, to begin with, absolutely shocked because it paints a somewhat different picture, although there are plenty of
Hmm.
elements of what Shinran teaches in there. And I was thinking, oh wow, well maybe this is why I haven't got Shinjin. Maybe I've just been going off on the wrong track, you know. So for a while actually, I got into the Chinese tradition of Pure Land Buddhism, which to me made more sense because one thing that the Chinese Pure Land tradition doesn't do is create a sect out of the Pure Land out of Pure Land Buddhism itself. They never formed a sect. It was just something which actually fits in very, very nicely with the rest of the Mahayana teaching and practices and whatnot. So I was really happy to get back into meditation, because the main practice in Chinese Pure Land is, of course, repeating the name of Amida Buddha, or Amitofo as they call him. Um, and was really glad to sort of like start doing that again with meditation and all that type of stuff, and really having some strong experiences from that. But I came across the problem of other practices because one of the things it's kind of expected that you do is take on the five precepts. If you're gonna get
Yep.
really serious
Yes.
with it, you have to take the five precepts. I got stuck at number one. I tried it as hard as I possibly could. I tried vegetarianism as hard, and I simply could not do it. So I thought, okay, problem. Plus, at the time anyway, I didn't really have the discipline necessary to keep up with whenever I did do it, I found it very, very
Yep.
rewarding
Yep.
indeed. But I
I've
wasn't
been
able to keep
through
up
the same, yeah,
yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. The same, yeah.
I couldn't keep up the discipline of it at the
Yeah.
time anyway. So I thought,
Because there's a
okay,
real structure of
hmm,
this is how you should do things. This is the
yeah,
attitude you should be doing it in while you're,
yeah. Well, the whole
this is
idea.
how many times you should be chanting. This is, yeah, there
Well,
was,
it
yeah.
didn't really sort of like go on about how many times you chant, although you could keep count and that type of stuff. But it was more kind of like um, I mean, I certainly didn't worry about how many times I chanted, repeated the name, so to speak, on per meditation. It was more kind of like, I just, amateur for amateur, like that type of thing. But and this is something which I can understand the reason behind that because it's dealing with the mind. You think about it, you're concentrating on the Buddha of infinite light and life and that type of thing, and it somehow at a very important level starts to deal with various things in the mind. It's a kind of like um I'm not trying to put it really because in other forms of it there's like in the meditation sutra, for example, you go through this actual visualization process of the land, the Buddha, and whatnot. But if you can't do that, according to Master Chantal, just you chant the name. Um, so I could see that, and I could see how that would work as well. But with the discipline and the if you wanted to
Yep.
get really serious, the five precepts,
Yep.
well, and I'm stuck at number one. So
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
rather than just sort of like, okay, this, I thought this is almost, I like the non-sectarian side of things, and I like the broader, in terms of practice and the way it was more accepting of other Mahayana, traditions and whatnot. But if I can't actually, if there's some parts of it that I can't do, then so in other words, I started looking at Jodo Shinshu again,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
actually through do you know what? I can't remember the name of the book, the Shinchaku or Shin
It
Holin's writing.
just before you say this, it always, I just want to, if I can just interject this one thing, there's
Mm,
always seems to be, there's always that point, whether it's with the
mm,
other Pure Land, pr say, let's call them practices or traditions
mm,
within other schools of Buddhism, or the kind of one, the kind of newer ones that focus on like Shantou and solely on Pure Land Buddhism, but in a traditional sort of Chinese way. And then there's still some combined practices and things like you're talking about
yeah.
precepts, or even in Jodo Shinshu. It seems that now there's no practices like that in Jodo Shinshu, but there's this point where you hit that you're like, I'm always looking, I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling, oh, there's the catch.
Yeah,
Do
that's
you know
right.
what I
Yeah.
mean? And then you
Oh
hit
yeah,
the catch, and then
yeah,
that's the catch.
yeah,
And with in the Pure Land, non-Jodo Shinshu Pure Land, not, paths, it was these, you always get to whichever the path it was, whatever the form of Buddhism was that had a path. There was that point where you go, oh yeah, there's that catch. There's the first catch. Oh, and then there's multiple ones after that. Okay, yeah,
mm,
I got it. I got it. I don't got it.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
in. I'm in. I'm in. Nope, I'm not in. I'm not
yeah,
in.
yeah.
And then so that's with that. And then with Jodo Shinshu, it was and again, I think this is the way it was presented. Combination with me, my experience was the way it was always presented. Jodo
Mm,
Shinshu teaching was presented, but also my understanding or misunderstandings or inability to perceive certain things. Combination of that, you get to that. It looked like, oh, I'm there. Yes, hopeful. Yes, I'm in. Yes, I'm. Shinjin. And I'd
yeah,
always hit that wall of absolute, total hearing without doubt. Absolute, no doubt. Hit that, and I'd hit that wall, and then I'd hit. That's the cat, and then that would always be the catch with me.
mm,
Oh yeah, I'm there. I'm here. I'm here. Catch. There's the catch. It would always
mm,
come back to that same catch, and it was the same catch in Jodoshin. It was varied. At least you had varied catches in the other Pure Lands, you know,
mm.
paths and schools. But with Jodo Shinshu, it was always the same catch, you know. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to kind of interject that while I was thinking of it. And we have where are we at here for this session? We have 5 minutes. We're at the 5 minute
All right,
mark, I
okay.
should say. Yeah.
Well,
So, and then
may
we
take
can
me a
do it.
bit
We'll do
longer than
another
5 minutes.
session. We'll do another
Yeah.
session.
I was
We
going to
might
say,
do more than just 2 sessions even,
yeah.
if you're willing, if you're up for it,
Well,
in
I was
this
going to say
series.
it's
But
going to take you a little bit more than 5 minutes to get to the rest. What I was going to say.
okay, well, we can continue, but go ahead. Continue as much. Well, then do you want to pick it up in the next session and I'll share something else I was gonna say?
I can, I can,
Continue. All right.
yeah, I can sort of like fill in a bit on the. So, but I didn't want to, So I was faced with this conundrum with traditional Pure Land and whatnot, and this is something I want to. A lot of this is to do with the way our minds work.
Yeah.
If you're used to, particularly in it's. I think we put our brains in a box and decide, well, this is all there is, and if I can't do this bit, then I might as well go on and it's a lot of and this is to do with karma and from previous lives, the way your mind is sort of like where it is at that particular point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I think there's a certain amount of hide and seek that goes on because like the number of times, for example, you thought you sort of like, okay, you got it and whatnot, and you were trying different methods to get Shinjin, including fake it till you make it
Yeah.
type of, because you thought, well, that's the only
Yeah,
method I got
exactly.
left. That's all I got left, guys. Just fake it. I've tried everything else; it hasn't happened. So maybe I forced my brain to think, yes, I've got Shinjin.
Yep.
That's definitely
Yep.
so. But all of this comes out of honest yearning.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
a real sort of like desperation. Look, I need this and I need it now. The questions that
Exactly.
come out of an honest yearning. So the conclusion I've come to before I get into the next thing that's happened, the conclusion I've come to is that the the is that really for as long as that yearning is there, as long as you've got that yearning there, then you are true. Your spirituality is true. If you get what I'm saying, your methods, you may not have found the right method yet, but or the penny may not have dropped in terms of Shinjin, but that yearning should not ever be criticized. Do you see what I'm getting at? It's a sign of a true spiritual seeker, and that person will find
Exactly. Yes.
exactly what they're yearning for because and you can't. The yearning is always the important thing. I'd say the
Yeah.
yearning is the important thing.
And
Yeah.
it's so important. It's, if somebody um um leaves,
Mm,
oftentimes I think they'll be back because
mm.
I've always come back because it's always the truth offered in Jodo Shinshu, for me anyway. It's like nowhere else, and
Absolutely.
I've
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
come back. Um, and we have kind of an attitude kind of in Shin Buddhism where I kind of feel that way. If someone leaves, they'll probably be back, but and that'll be great if they are, great. If they're not, that's great too, because that's their karma ripening.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
karma will ripen maybe later in life, maybe in another lifetime, wherever it is. But at some point, they will encounter that. They will have the encounter. They'll have that point where it's all ripening and the five-fold teaching unfolds and it all starts happening. So
Mm.
either way, we have this like you're never really out. Do you know what I mean?
No, not
In
quite. No,
Jodo
no.
Shinshu, in Shin Buddhism, for me anyway, you're never really out. And literally with our kind of small informal sangha in the UK, we you're still in even if you're out. Case in point, right here.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Even if
Yeah.
you feel Anyway, on that cliffhanger, I think we'll leave it there and we'll
Mhm.
resume in the next session. It'll be about 10 minutes. I have to wait between sessions
Sure.
with
Yeah.
because I'm
Okay.
down
I'm
the
gonna get some
road. So
tea.
all right. So all right. So for now, Namo Amida Butsu. I'll see you in a bit.
Okay. Yeah.
Bye.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.